Okay, good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Patrick Biggerstaff, and I'm Director of Career Technical and Adult Education with Area 31 Career Programs in Indianapolis, Indiana. I'm also proud to serve as Vice President of the ACTE Administration Division. This webinar is one of a series focused on planning for a COVID-19 impacted school year, and we are looking at that school year through the lens of ACTE's high-quality CTE Program of Study framework. Today's topic is facilities, equipment, technology, and materials. Our webinar will focus on adapting CTE facilities, equipment, and technology for blended and socially distanced learning, including activities such as modifying lab spaces, changing cleaning and safety protocols, and exploring virtual, simulation, and mobile technology for hands-on learning. ACTE has surveyed its members, and results show that this topic is a priority for CTE professionals, as we are all forced to change our regular classroom and school experiences. Whether you are planning to welcome students back to your program in the fall, teaching them remotely, or planning some kind of blended model, which is likely for many of us, we are hopeful that this webinar will be helpful to you as we learn what others are doing to meet these challenges. I would like to mention that ACTE also has plans to release in late June a new guide planned as a support to help CTE professionals think through these topics as we prepare for the fall semester. As we begin, I would also like to thank all of you for the work that you are doing to keep our programs moving forward during an extremely challenging time. I would like to thank our panelists for sharing their time and expertise with us today. I will introduce them in a moment, but first, a few directions about how we will conduct the meeting and how you can interact with us today. First, you may notice that we are using Zoom webinar, which is different than the Zoom meetings ACTE has used in the past. Zoom webinar allows for more participants and has different features that I would like to explain. We will be using a question and answer feature for questions. The mics, participant video, and chat features have all been disabled due to our large crowd. Please type your questions into the question and answer box. I think you'll find this feature easy to use and more efficient than the chat feature. We encourage you to share your questions throughout the presentation, as our panelists and ACTE staff will be responding during the event. We also encourage you as attendees to share your questions as well in cases where, share your comments as well in cases where you've already discovered solutions or best practices. You can also share any resources that you have in the question and answer box. Just type the web links and share information that you would in a chat feature. It doesn't have to be in the form of a question. If you are experiencing technical challenges, please use the raise hand feature in the participant box. Someone on ACTE staff will be happy to help you. Next, I would like to ask Alicia Heislip, ACTE's Senior Director of Public Policy, to provide a few opening remarks about ACTE's high-quality CTE Program of Study framework, which this webinar and the entire series is built upon. Alicia?
Thanks, Patrick, and thanks to all of you for being with us today. We know this topic of facilities, equipment, technology, and materials is at the top of everyone's list as it relates to planning for the COVID-impacted school year, whether that starts this summer or as it goes into the fall. And we wanted to say just a little bit about the framework that we're using for the entire webinar series as we kick things off. We hope that many of you have seen ACTE's high-quality CTE Program of Study framework in the past. The framework was released in 2018 with 12 elements, starting with standards aligned and integrated curriculum that forms the foundation of a program, all the way up through the data and program improvement that you need to ensure continued improvement and success of your programs and students. This framework, as we were thinking about planning for fall, provides a in-depth look at all of the aspects of CTE programs. And so we thought it would be a useful way to organize the content of both the guide that Patrick mentioned that's coming out within the next couple of weeks and this webinar series. I will mention that over the last few months, we've started a soft launch per se of a 13th element of high quality CTE programs, and that is system supports, the foundational elements that need to be in place for all of these other 12 things to actually flourish and lead to a high quality program. And in case you missed it, we had 2 webinars on Tuesday that are recorded and archived, available for you on that system supports element. And the other 11 elements will be covered over the next few weeks in our webinar. And on the next slide, I just want to share a little bit about what the facilities, equipment, technology, and materials element is all about. And you'll see here that it is many of the things that we're thinking about in response to the COVID pandemic. First of all, it's that the equipment and technology meets current industry and workforce practices and requirements. And that's one of the unique things about CTE programs, but it presents some added challenges as we think about, it's more than just a Chromebook in our classrooms. It's industry standard technology and equipment that students need access to. And some of it can be transitioned remotely, and some of it is a much bigger challenge to do that. We talk about aligning to curriculum standards and program objectives. There are some standards in CTE programs that we recognize you cannot teach without appropriate equipment and technology. Safety is a huge part of the standards related to high quality CTE, and these, were prepared 2 years ago when we would have never imagined the importance of occupational safety within the context of our labs to be as important as it is today and as you think about returning to school. So that safe and appropriate use of equipment and facilities, is really elevated in this environment, as I'm sure we'll spend a lot of time discussing today. Regularly inspecting, updating, and replacing equipment and technology also has some new meaning for us in the COVID impacted world. And finally, looking at flexible delivery models and partnerships to ensure that your students have access to equipment. Again, that's what many of you have been doing for the last couple of months, is those flexible delivery models. So these are kind of the framing criteria that we'll have in the back of our mind as we go through this element. And when you see the planning guide, there'll be a specific section on facilities, equipment, technology, and materials that includes insights, from today's webinar, as well as additional questions that you might want to think through in this topic area. So with that, I will turn it back to you, Patrick, to get us started.
Thank you, Alicia. For those of you who are not familiar with ACTE's high quality CTE framework, I urge you to take a look at it, as well as the growing number of resources that ACTE has made available on the ACTE website at acteonline.org. It is now my pleasure to introduce today's panelists. We'll begin with Ms. Yolanda Bell, Executive Director of Career and Technical Education at Fulton County Schools in Atlanta, Georgia. Yolanda, welcome. Dr. Brian Botempo, Superintendent of Auburn Career Center in Concord Township, Ohio. Sure, he'll pull his video up in a second. And then lastly, we have Mr. Bill Bradley, Assistant Superintendent at Canadian Valley Technology Center in beautiful El Reno, Oklahoma. Welcome. We're happy to have all of you today to share your knowledge and expertise. As our opening question, I would like to ask each of you the following. Could you share a little bit about your secondary or post-secondary delivery model, as well as how you are planning your re-entry in the coming months? Yolanda, if we can begin with you.
Sure, and thank you very much for having me. As Patrick said, my name is Yolanda Bell, and I'm the Executive Director of Career, Technical, and Georgia Agriculture Education, as well as I am the current president of Georgia ACTE. So in Fulton County, we have a very large school system. It is secondary, K through 12 or pre-K through 12, and we have about 100,000 students. We are located in the metro Atlanta area, and we are a very large district. We're 100 miles top to bottom. And so we have very thoughtful and intentional pathways. We offer 16 out of 17 of the career clusters that are in Georgia right now. The only one that we don't offer. Georgia has a real big focus on energy. So we have added that as a career cluster. And right now we don't offer that in Fulton County, but it is on the way. So that's a little bit about our program areas, a secondary program. As we look at coming back, I think we are having the same conversations everybody is, right? So we are looking at really 3 different options. So coming back in a new type of normal, coming back in a blended model, and coming back in what we're calling a universal remote, where if the rate of COVID cases increase, then that would be when we decide to, make a decision on returning or coming back in a remote model. We're also looking at an individual remote option. Right now, we don't currently have a full virtual learning program, but we recognize that if we go back face-to-face, we do need to provide some virtual options for students that, have health considerations. So we are also we're standing up a virtual school that will have CTE options, K through 12. So we've got a lot going on and no decision made, right? So we presented those options to our board the day before yesterday, and they approved them. And then we are going to make the decision around the end of June.
Thank you, Yolanda.
Mhm.
Brian?
Thank you, Patrick. And just like Yolanda, I just want to say thank you for the opportunity. Our Career Center is located on the east side of Cleveland, in the counties just to the east of that lake and Geauga counties. We are a half-day high school. We service first-year students in the morning and second-year students in the afternoon that are at high school, and then we have an adult program that runs almost exclusively in the evenings. We do have some daytime classes where we have facility availability. And we serve, somewhere in the neighborhood of 1,200 students. We have 22 programs. We do have a really large facility, which helps us a ton when we're trying to address, social distancing and spacing. One of the things that, as we're looking at for opening up in the fall, we like to call it 100% capacity with modifications. And so, that's, everything from we have classrooms that have the related classroom next to the lab. Well, in some cases, the related classroom isn't big enough. And so we're just going to have instructional time in the lab, and then we'll modify within that lab space. And then the second option is the blended option. And what does that look like? And for every program, it's a little bit different. Where IT programs have the ability to be maybe a little bit more remote and they're blended versus maybe an advanced manufacturing class may have to be, their blended might look more like on campus more than remote. And then within that blended, there's this temporary blended option that, we have to be versatile enough that if there is a window in time, whether it's for whatever health reasons, some student isn't able to attend, but we need to maintain instruction, and what does that look like as well. Then of course, the third option is remote. Certainly we've learned a lot from what we've had to deal with in the past 3 months. But we're actually we're about halfway through flushing out the details on each one of our 22 programs, and hope to have those in close to final, or at least, a draft to present to the board in the next couple of days. So that's where we are.
Excellent. Thank you, Brian. Bill?
Move ahead. Our school district, Canadian Valley, is comprised of 3 campuses. We're located in 2 counties that are west of Oklahoma City and southwest of Oklahoma City. We have a campus in Chickasha, Oklahoma, and we have one that is in the Mustang, Yukon area. And our largest campus, which is located in El Reno, Oklahoma, it's the one that I'm using as a backdrop for this particular Zoom. Just as a note, 7 years ago, on May 31st, 2013, this campus, the El Reno campus, was destroyed by a tornado. So we experienced some particular challenges that seem very familiar with what we're dealing with today as well, in terms of planning and communication. we have, we offer programs to high school students and to adult students. 65 or full-time program, 65% of the students are high school, and about 35% would be adult students. We do have adult and continuing education classes that are also short-term in nature that go on as well in the daytime and in the evening. We also do industry-specific classes for, we customize classes for our local companies. So we do have some full-time adult programs that go on in the summertime, and so we have been in conjunction with our state's plan to reopen. On June 1st, we started allowing some scheduled classes back on campus. So we're slowly starting back with some class for full-time programs. We also have 2 operating daycares that we started back on June 1st as well. And then on June 15th, we are starting to, we'll be starting some industry-specific classes in that vein. So we ask our full-time program instructors at the end of the year to provide us with plans of what it would look like if they had to start their school year online, virtual, remotely. We figure that if we have that plan in place, and plus we already know how to do the full-blown in-person classes, that between that we could also adopt a blended model if we need to pretty quickly. So in conjunction with our 14 partner schools that we have in our district, we'll be working this summer to really nail down the plans on what school's going to look like in August.
Thank you, Bill. When we return in the fall, it is very likely that any in-person instruction will have to be aligned with social distancing guidelines, safety guidelines set by our local Department of Health. Bill, can you share any thoughts you have on arranging equipment or furniture to allow for social distancing at your facility?
Well, one of the things that we've made a strategic decision is we have a lot of community activities that happen on our campuses. We have seminar centers and meeting rooms that we allow our people in our community to utilize. And so what we've done strategically is to hold off scheduling anything for that until after September 1st, because we feel like we're probably to be able to social distance in some of our classes, we may need to utilize some of those open spaces that we have, like our seminar center and our meeting rooms and our common areas. Some of the classes that we'll be able to accommodate. You take an auto mechanics class or an auto service technology class that has a classroom and a shop area, and we may be able to utilize some of that space to be able to create the social distance that we need. Part of the students in the shop, part of the students in the classroom, but we felt like we needed to right now allow ourselves some room within our facilities to be able to use that flexible space if we need it. So one of the things we learned during the tornado time period was that you have to be able to allow yourself to be able to think a little bit different and give yourself permission to operate your classes a little bit different than what you did in the past, and not get locked into that a program has to look exactly the way it's always looked, that you have to adapt to the situation that you have, and still maintain quality instruction, still maintain those elements that it has high quality equipment and representation of your industry, but your classroom and your shop area may look a little bit different to accommodate for what you have at the time. So,
agreed. Thank you, Bill. Brian, both you and Bill have mentioned larger open spaces on your campus, utilizing the facility space that's available Can you talk a little bit about the actual movement of students through those spaces, maybe transitioning through passing periods? How do you ensure safety as people move through your facility?
Well, it's a great question. We have, one of the fortunate things that we do have, the way our building is set up, that, in not every case, but in most cases, there's an exterior door that leads into the building. Now, normally that's always closed and locked, and only for safety reasons you can push out. But under these circumstances, we're utilizing that as a way to come and go into the classroom, which helps a lot. And so we're also instituting a pretty simple concept. When you leave the hallway, you poke your head out, you look both ways. If you're the only one in the hallway, you get to go down the hall to use the restroom. And how do we do that? It's easier when it's not the elementary group. You're dealing with high school students, and so we think some of those are going to be pretty easy to manage. The passing through the hallways. We had a pretty unique discussion, the way our school is set up, about our locker situation. And it's set up as a traditional high school, lockers all the way down the hallway. Well, if you think about the way that might flow, is that how are you going to do that if at dismissal time, even if it's your own classroom, say, okay, the first 20 lockers belong to classroom A. Well, that doesn't work. And so we're having the conversation of, one, do we even use them? But yes, we'll assign them with the idea, don't use them unless you absolutely have to. And when we do assign them, putting them every fifth or sixth locker. So when my classroom goes into the hallway, they still maintain that separation. And then it's just a matter of managing when the next class goes into the hallway. So we're instituting some of that. As far as the serving of food, I'm sure that's a challenge that everybody's going to have. And we're really, our partner school districts, because we're a half day, they do in most cases get their lunches at their home school, because we're the morning and afternoon option for them. And so, but there's always students that have a need for us to provide that for them. And so we do have, again, big enough space that we can provide for that within the cafeteria. We're also looking at just offering it to them right in their classrooms and having it more of a grab and go situation. So we just remove that issue from that large gathering area. So those are, and on top of that, we have talked about having adults assigned to the hallways, just as a traffic controller, if you will, because there's bound to be things that happen, and we just feel like to be proactive on the safe side, we have an adult somehow assigned. One of the things that Ohio has done is they're giving us some flexibility in how we assign people from what we have traditionally done. So if I have, an example might be, if we're not going to run the cafeteria, well, I have an employee, well, maybe I use them as a hall monitor then. So we do have some flexibility in there. So we're exploring as we're going through this exercise to make sure that, to ensure that those guidelines are being followed in the hallways. We'll have somebody there to monitor them.
Thank you very much, Brian. There is a interaction in our question and answer platform. If the class is divided between shop area and classroom area, are there staff in each area to act as a monitor to assist the teacher? And then there is a response. We are considering using librarians, paraprofessionals, et cetera, to help monitor those classrooms. So I point that engagement out to remind you all that you have access to the question and answer room, and you are welcome to engage via that media as well. The next question we'll ask of all three panelists. It has to do with whether or not you currently have enough PPE on hand, and then what your plan is for making sure that you access enough PPE in time for your students to re-engage. So I'd like to begin with Yolanda Bell.
Sure. So, just as the teachers and schools have been working remotely, our district office has been working remotely too, up until now, right? So our first day back as a district office is June 15th. And we are being provided 2 reusable masks by our district. So I imagine that the same thing is going to happen in the return to school. We did use some of the CARES funding to procure PPE for the district. And we did that through a RFP process too. So we procured it in bulk as opposed to, having, relying on individual programs and schools to get that PPE equipment. So as of right now, as we go back, we, as a district, we're getting 2 reusable masks. We have to wear the mask when we're in the buildings. And I imagine that that's going to happen once we return back to school as far as our teachers and employees.
Thank you, Yolanda. Brian or Bill?
I'll go. We have, we participate in a group purchasing consortium in Ohio, and right now we have all but one item that's in process of being delivered. That we do have one on back order, and it's actually one of the dispenser, for the hand sanitizer. It's on back order, but we're pretty confident we're going to have those. But I would say we had a conversation today about the monitoring the utilization, and because what we might think might be enough to last, there's a lot of estimates out there, but the last thing we want to do is miss the mark on that and run out. And I can assure I can't assure you, but everybody's probably going to be thinking about round 2 of purchasing if you haven't bought for the year or whatever your capacity or limit was, that sometime in the fall, that second round of big purchases is going to happen. And so I've made sure that my folks are monitoring the utilization, keeping a daily log of whether it's gloves, sanitizer, whatever supplies they are. And so we can immediately begin to identify some trends in purchasing or utilization so we can get in front of the orders, because back orders can happen, and now we're in a bind. So that was actually the discussion that we had today, just to really make sure we stay in front of that. So that's just some advice that I would share.
Thank you, Brian. Bill, what are your thoughts?
Well, we have a supply clerk, somebody who is really staying on top of where to get certain PPE and starting to stock that in a central warehouse that we have. We also have some community folks who have stepped up, and they've produced some of the product locally that they're donating to different entities, and so we've been able to enjoy that as well. We've got some of our healthcare facilities that we have really, really strong relationships with, that they've talked to us and told us that if we have a need for certain PPE that we're not able to get to call them, and that they'll help us through their supply chains as well. So we feel like we're able to get what we need, but it is one of those things that if you wait till the fall to start getting that on board, then you're probably going to be too late, because the lead times are longer than what they ever have been. And so we've started the process of identifying quantities and having our supply clerk just start to purchase it, and we'll distribute across our district that way. So
thank you, Bill. So we're going to divert from the equipment just a second, since we're on the topic of PPE. There were a couple questions that came up in the chat room. One was from our dear friend, anonymous attendee, who asked what the role of nurses will be in your facilities. So I know there are people doing temporal scanning and various activities. Some are putting them on nurses, some are putting those responsibilities on the teachers. So we'll toss that to Yolanda first. Do you have any thoughts on nurses in your school?
Yeah, so we have either a clinic aide or a nurse at all of our K through 12 schools, so about 100 schools. And so I've been on the team working. We are looking at hopefully being able to offer a blended summer school option where kids are going to be coming on campus starting July. And so I've been working a lot with student health, and what they're telling me what they're working on is really providing a lot of training for our faculty and staff about how to self-check, what signs to look for, what are the good hygiene practices. So, and really making sure that everybody in the building is trained as far as health and safety, so that that kind of alleviates a little bit from the clinic nurse and the aides, so that they can handle, if there's any larger cases or, more pertinent cases, so that, everybody in the school is kind of vested in, good hygiene, safety and health practices. So we are developing all sorts of training materials for our faculty and staff to help as far as that.
Thank you, Yolanda. I think one of the questions in the chat room came up, when you have students who are attending half day with you, or even if they're attending full day, are you scanning them as they enter? Are you asking them to complete some type of a screening survey before they come on campus? What are your thoughts?
No. So we're not scanning them. We're not taking temperature checks. We're asking everybody to do just kind of a self-check as soon as you wake up. Do I feel good? Do I take a thermometer check? Providing guidelines about, what is your temperature? What is a high temperature where you do not need to come to work? The 100.1, I think it is. So just giving everybody some good safety and training to do that self-check before they get to school. And so, no, we are not screening.
Brian or Bill?
Go
Well,
ahead, Bill.
I can go ahead and answer. Currently, our population that's on our campuses right now is pretty small, so we're not requiring temperature checks or screening right now. But we are in the discussion that once we start entering into the fall and start having more students come on, and we start having our doors open to more community activities where people that are not scheduled to come on campus may be coming on campus to inquire about classes or to come for a community event, then we may look at some screening at that point. And we're monitoring the case numbers in our counties and in our communities, so that if we start seeing a rise in those cases, then to where we start seeing more community spread, then we may end up implementing some screening at that point as well. So it's kind of a conditional thing right now for us. But again, we're like Yolanda, that right now with our low numbers, we're just asking them that if they don't feel good, if they're sick, then please stay home. That's faculty, staff, students, everybody. So
Thank you, Bill. Brian?
And real quickly, we our adult programs, we had a few of them that we're still running through the summer, and those we are doing the checks. They're pretty small numbers, and so it's manageable, and we're monitoring to see how that's going, and staying in touch with our health district. We're actually having our county, the two counties we work with are actually having a superintendent's meeting. We're talking through that because that is one of the issues. Students start at another school district and get on their bus and then come to us. If they've already done that, when whatever that is, there's no reason for us to do it again. And so now if transportation, kids come directly from home as opposed to riding on the school bus, that may have us do something a little bit differently. So right now we haven't finalized that, but we're looking through each of those scenarios to see, what our obligations are, and then coordinate with other districts, because again, we're all, and as we say, we're all in this together, and there's a team approach. So what school districts are doing and what we're doing at the Career Center, we try to do it as similarly as possible.
Can you guys speak briefly on where you are receiving your guidance for what you would consider to be safe? And as a related question, when we talk about the use of equipment, how do we know how much space to put in between? What are you looking for what those rules would be?
So we're receiving all of our guidance. We have a task force put together that includes people from our safety and security team, our school health team, our cabinet level members, and what they are really doing is paying attention to the guidance from the CDC. It's very helpful being here in Atlanta because the CDC is right here in our backyard. Not that we get the information any faster than you guys do. So we're using a lot of that information. Georgia did recently put out a reopening plan for K through 12. So it's out there online. And I think it's not just Georgia, right? It's going to be it's going to be helpful for anybody. And even before Georgia put theirs out, we were looking at other states. Maryland has a great K through 12 reopening school plan that also addresses some things around CTE. So we were looking at Maryland's plan. So I think there's just a lot of good information out there right now. Right now, it's about really taking the information and getting into the micro details and, putting some action steps to it. So those are just some things that we're looking at.
Thank you. There is a question in the chat room about the sharing of tools and equipment, how you'll maintain social distancing when we're sharing tools and equipment. Particularly in the chat room, there are a couple questions from auto service and diesel tech, where it's common to have several students working on the same vehicle. Any thoughts from our panelists?
I can kind of answer. I would think that that's one of those areas that that we're going to rely on those instructors. We've got a general set of guidelines that we're going to have for all of our programs, but then each of our program areas are going to provide specific guidelines and specific plans for their area. And for example, the example that's being used with auto service, there's a lot of individual students have their individual tool sets that they would use, but that practice of disinfecting, wiping down those tools and wiping down those work areas before and after use, we've got that it's recommended before use, but required after use that you wipe that down and make sure that we have all of the resources that they can do that. It's going to take longer to do a task. It's going to require them to think a little bit differently in terms of be thinking about the next person that's coming up that's going to use that, or be thinking about who used that before you did. But that's the change in mindset that has to happen with our students. And then whenever they get into the workplace, then if they learn those, then they can carry those into the workplace as well. It will require students to take a little bit longer to do a task. So we've got to be able to give them afford them that room and allow them to do that and give them permission to do that too as well. So
I almost think in those types of spaces, it's going to be a little bit opposite from what Brian was talking about earlier. So if in our automotive labs, we have a classroom, then you have the lab space, and both of them are very large spaces that you can practice social distancing. But would it be better if, you say on this day, all the kids are in the classroom, that way that lab space can kind of rest and get disinfected. And then on Tuesday, everybody's in the lab, but then you have specific students assigned to different areas, right? So I just think we're going to have to really get intentional and just give our teachers a lot of support in being able to plan for that.
And I would add that we're talking about what the industry standard is, to follow that and use that as guidance, and then also how do we provide what's the glove that you wear for your industry, and just think about that in terms of that extra safety barrier. We are looking at, from an instructor perspective, is that what we might have done in the past, where you open the hood of a car and and then there's 6 students gathered around looking in, and maybe the instructor has the GoPro camera and they're looking down and students are still in the seats looking at the screen. They get the same experience of looking, maybe not touching, but they're looking at what's going on. So it's going to change the way we instruct. But I also think it's a great opportunity now for the instructor to capture that video. Now we've got it in our instructional software package or whatever, however we store that. So now we have a series of trainings that we've recorded live for somebody that may not be there that could participate. They can watch it live from home or reference it later. So it's going to create other opportunities, and then it's a matter of how do we work through that rotation when students then will then get their hand-on experience, and we can manage that better then once everybody's had that visual opportunity.
Thank you all. Most of the questions thus far have had to do with an in-person setting. I'd like to transition to more of a remote learning environment. First question, how do you think you'll work to ensure access, not only internet access, but also access to devices for all of your students? Brian, do you have any thoughts? You want to kick us off?
Sure. And so, we certainly have had the opportunity to identify who the students are that we have currently, or this past school year that just wrapped up, and who may be coming back and where they might have some individual access challenges. And so the good thing is we've been able to work through those. But from an instructional standpoint, we have charged all of our staff with identifying what is your remote learning go-to now that you've had that opportunity. And so we've been working to solve that problem for a while. And I would say that, without giving the extensive list, our instructors have been exploring and taking the opportunity to look at it. I was just having a conversation about our advanced manufacturing classes, and they use an IE simulator for G-code. And so they're saying that this is fantastic. It's really helps the remote opportunity. It's not the same as hands-on, but it does allow, you put the programming in, students get to practice, and they get to see if the tool actually comes out the way it was intended. So healthcare has done a pretty good job from what I understand. There's Healthcare Center 21 that does pretty well, and cosmetology has one called Milady. And if you kind of go down through the list, there's a lot of them out there. And we know that that some of the more difficult ones and more expensive one might be, how do I simulate welding at home? And we have Lincoln Electric right in our backyard, and we're having these conversations with them. So I'm pretty confident we're going to come up with something that's doable. And so, but I would say we're probably about 80% of the way solving for that.
So I'd like to ask Bill the same question, but while Bill is responding on how he'll provide such access, I'd like to invite everyone in the audience today to share other ideas, such as Milady, that would be a instructional resource that you found to be very valuable in a remote learning environment. Bill?
With 65% of our full-time program students coming from the high school, they're faced with those same challenges as well. So a lot of those solutions are being developed with our partner schools, ensuring that they have devices, ensuring that they have access. And so that really helps us out whenever those challenges have already been met. And then there are some of our our adult programs that we have, they're already required to have their own devices to be able to do for example, our practical nursing program, it's pretty much all online. And so they've got their devices that they use. So we have some devices that we can check out to students. Our biggest challenge comes when they live in an area that our school district runs from anywhere from the west side of Oklahoma City all the way down to southern part of Grady County, which is pretty rural, and even the west side of our Canadian county is pretty rural as well. And so sometimes access to, even if they have the devices and have the stuff, the high-speed internet access just isn't there in their area. So those have been some challenges, but the state recognizes that now. That's one of the things that's come out of this, is that we're recognizing where our gaps are in technology in the state, and we're able to start looking to develop that as well. So fortunately, our partner schools are there to help us out with some of that. And so if they've got that resource through there, then we're able to piggyback off of that. But those are some of the challenges whenever you do that. If it all else fails, we still have the pencil, paper, textbook that we can deliver instruction with as well. So.
Thank you, Bill. Yolanda, do you have any thoughts regarding access for your students in remote learning?
Yeah, I mean, we're one-to-one. And so all of our students that are in CTE classes, especially 612, have access to devices. What was interesting during remote learning, and now that, if there's a possibility of returning to remote learning, one of the things that we are tackling is specific devices for different programs that might need a more robust device. Like, for example, graphic design. So the devices that we have are not robust enough to do Creative Cloud on, right? So do I need to use Perkins to purchase devices for remote learning possibility for students that are in graphic design or marketing classes? So that was something that we discovered coming out of remote learning. I would say like Code High School, for IT, they did a really great job with us with setting up webinars for our teachers, and we used a lot of that for our IT classes. And Knowledge Matters, if you have any business and marketing classes that want to do simulations, that has been really great, and that was a really great thing during remote learning too. And then we're looking at using Visible Body, which students can use on their cell phones to do all sorts of augmented reality and 3D things related to anatomy that we were able to test out during remote learning that our teachers really liked. So.
Great, thank you. There's a question in the comment box that we're not going to spend too much time on, but with such a lack of equity and access to proper bandwidth in all areas, how do you plan for asynchronous delivery for so many students? Did you adjust days students attended? Was required online time adjusted, and were end of course tests waived or other plans made for proctoring? So I will answer that for our district and just say yes to all of the above. We're trying to be as flexible as possible in meeting the needs of our students, however we might do that. We'll come back to some of these question and answer section comments in a few minutes, but we're running a little short on time, so we'll do so as time allows. We did ask for some suggestions for good resources for remote learning. In addition to Milady and some of the others that were addressed already, Electude was mentioned, ASE Test Prep, CDX, all of those are solid for auto, Solid Professor for CAD CAM, and some other options in there. From the California Department of Education, this is not really a electronic resource in the same capacity as a Solid Professor or maybe a NEPRIS for employer engagement would be, but there are several lesson plans for remote learning that are offered there. And then I appreciate Rachel Benke sharing a compilation of resources from CTE directors across campus. So make sure you check out all of the resources in the question and answer section. There are many listed there. Okay, let me get myself organized. Okay, for students who don't have internet access, what are some ways that you and your team have effectively engaged and supported students? Brian, we'll start off with you.
So we, right away, we started to work with the local school districts that we serve, and they put in either access points on school buses that would drive through neighborhoods with established times, to times where they could access it through in the parking lot at the libraries. And so we did actual individual follow-ups with every single student to make sure that they were able to get the connection that they needed. And for those that there might have been some challenges, we made sure that we either dropped off ourselves, mailed to, or made arrangements to pick up assignments But by the end of this past timeline, we had, I believe, every single student was taken care of one way or another. We were able to provide them with the academic information they needed.
Thank you. Yolanda or Bill?
I would say the same. We received pretty early on, Georgia received a grant from the US DOE for hotspots for some of our Title I schools. So we were able to get enough hotspots, I think, for 7 or 8 of our elementary schools, where we used data around engagement where we noticed that kids were not engaged, and we were able to get them those hotspots, and they're actually using them right now for summer school. So
Great, thank you. Bill, any comments?
Very similar. The ones that we noticed that were not engaged, we did everything that we could do to contact them personally to find out what the challenges were there, and we're able to overcome that. Sometimes it would be the traditional learning packet, hard copy learning packet. Sometimes it was just they didn't have they had led us to believe that they had a device and maybe they didn't, and so we made sure that they had something that they could utilize to learn from and make connection with. So
Thank you. So one of the last questions is kind of considering those areas where you really need to be hands-on. You really have to be engaging with materials and supplies to be able to do the work. Do you guys have any plans or have you thought through sending materials home? For example, I know of a ag instructor who brought packets to the home of all of her students. They were able to spend time documenting plant growth and analyzing soil properties over the course of the semester, and had some assessments based around that. So do you have any ideas for what that might look like in your district, and also how you can ensure safety when you're delivering and potentially recovering some of these materials? Open to all.
I'll go first. We always worry about safety. I can't imagine that, that we're going to be able to send some of the equipment home. That certainly doesn't make sense. But what I would say is that that many of our trade industries have done a pretty amazing job providing us with options. And so I'll use the Lincoln Electric one again. They have a we tens of thousands of dollars in the past to create to purchase a simulator. Not that they're really cheap, but for what might be $10,000, you're able to get your hands on a simulator. We also have, our instructor has made some unique simulators on his own, using some different creative methods. But what it allows is that for students that aren't able to be in the classroom for, maybe it's an individual reason or there's a few students out, we're able to send those home, where in the past we wouldn't have been able to do that. So the simulator world has really stepped up, and it's really made a difference for us.
I would say the same kind of thing there. Again, you're going to have to give yourself permission to, where in the past you might not have sent those things home with students, a simulator that in unique circumstances like this, whenever the goal is for students to learn and to learn with high quality industry equipment, sometimes you have to send it home with them and allow yourself to do that. Just what Yolanda said about the technology that it takes for maybe a pre-engineering class or a graphic design class or multimedia class, those computers cost a lot of money. They're quite a bit more than some of the typical computers or devices that we send out there. But if a student's really going to learn that trade, they're going to need to be able to take that, and we're going to need to be able to let them do that for specific tasks and stuff, and trust that they'll use them for all the right reasons, and I'm sure they will. The thing that we work with one of the universities on nurse refresher, and they've allowed us to use a program called vSim for like clinical experiences. So there's a lot of those organizations out there that have simulation type learning programs you can use as well. So
Thank you. So we are down to just a few minutes left. So I want to take a moment. I know these have been kind of trying times for everyone. It's exciting, but it can also be stressful. I'd like to take just maybe a minute apiece and ask our panelists to share their silver linings, some positives that have come out of this challenge. And we'll begin with Ms. Bell.
So when you were talking about the other question around getting out materials and supplies, I had culinary teachers who delivered food to a lot of their students and then did online cooking classes on Microsoft Teams. And it was not only the students, but they also invited their entire faculty and staff and their principals and ourselves. Like, we were all in the kitchen cooking together paella. So, I mean, that was just, it was really good. It was good for me to see her with her students. And I know she couldn't scope that out for her whole entire class. But I saw pockets of that happening across our district, and it was really great.
Thank you. Dr. Batempo.
I would say that, you know, these are the times to lead, right? That, you know, people are looking for guidance, but I got to tell you that, you know, people also have stepped up beyond my imagination. And so I think it's, you know, the most difficult time that's brought out the best in our education and our communities. And so asking for some support or some help, and people have stepped up. I think from an instructional standpoint, we're going to be so much better because we've had to find unique ways to deliver. And all it does is add, you know, tools to the toolbox that we didn't have previously. And for those that might have had some reservations about doing it in the past, they're doing it, and they're doing a great job. So I think it's brought out the best in people on both the instructional side and just you know, stepping up to the plate when they needed to.
Thank you. Mr. Bradley.
you know, top to bottom and side to side, all of our people at our school, our faculty and staff from all levels of our organization. When we went into the remote work where we couldn't be on site, we kept hearing the we're ready to come back to work. What can we do to make a difference? They want to be on site. They want to do their work. They want to do good things. So that spirit of people, top to bottom, side to side, all the way across the organization was really, really strong there. So one of the things that we found out, not just with our instructors learning new ways to deliver to deliver instruction, which is really going to, I agree with Brian that's going to be a launch us so far ahead in the future, but also with our employees too. We have employees who have never used this type of technology before, and we were conducting regular meetings and regular communication with that, and so they've got to experience that, whether that was on their phone or a device when we sat home with them or one they had at their home. And so new world that we're living in, and I was very pleased at how accepting people were of the change and just trying to figure out ways to make a difference in people's lives. So continue to do that.
Wonderful. We are at the conclusion of our webinar, so I'd like to thank each of our panelists. We really appreciate you taking this time to share your thoughts and insights with us. To our valued members, ACTE is always happy to serve and support you. We thank you for joining us today. We hope to see many of you back here as we continue this series on COVID-19 and the high-quality CTE program of study framework. These will be held throughout the months of June and July, so please stay tuned. Hope all of you take care. Be well.